having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Happy Saturday, one and all. It's 9 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my big opinion, the media chews up and spits out another celebrity. I'll be dealing with the tabloid press and their treatment of one of the country's biggest stars. Find out more in just a moment. In a Mark Meets special, World Cup winning South African captain Francois Pienaar.
Mr. Mandela would be very sad and very angry. There's certain things I hate in the movie, and then I couldn't drive home because it's too far, so I slept in the car.
He slept in the car. The man who made history with Nelson Mandela tells his incredible story in just a few minutes. Also, former Labour leader Neil Kinnock says the public do not love Keir Starmer. Does it matter? Do we need to actually like those who lead us? I'll be asking Britain's best-known political double act, the very lovable Hamiltons. And why it's time for the King and the country to forgive Prince Harry. Plus, is hard-working Princess Anne the jewel in the royal crown? Two hours of big opinion, big debate and big entertainment. It is Saturday night. Mark Dolan Tonight is your perfect Saturday night in, so why don't you crack open a cold bottle of beer, uncork a wine or fire up the kettle and let's get to work. Big stories, big debate, big entertainment and a major celebrity in hot water after the news headlines and Aaron Armstrong.
Hi there, very good evening to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Well, the Eurovision Song Contest is underway in Sweden, but it has been marred by allegations from inside the arena and ongoing protests outside of it. The Netherlands entry Joost Klein's been disqualified. The Dutch broadcaster says it was over a threatening movement he made towards someone who was filming him, reportedly against his wishes. Ireland's entrant Bambi Thugs accused the Israeli broadcaster Khan of repeatedly breaking the rules regarding its commentary towards their act during the semi-finals. And the French artist Slimane has broken Eurovision rules on making political statements. It happened during his warm-up with an on-stage speech calling for peace. Meanwhile, pro-Palestinian demonstrators have been gathering outside the arena to protest about Israel's participation. And they've been heard shouting "Free Palestine" and "Shame" towards fans heading into the venue. A number of protesters, including the activist Greta Thunberg, have been forcibly detained and taken away by police. The Israeli army has issued new evacuation orders for various parts of the Gaza Strip as it expands its military operation. Residents in Rafah have been told to move towards a so-called expanded humanitarian zone on the west coast. Around 300,000 Palestinians have already left. However, Israeli forces have also told residents in northern Gaza to temporarily evacuate, following what they say are attempts by Hamas to reassemble in the area. It's prompted fears of an assault on two fronts. The UK and its allies have warned Israel against carrying out a military offensive in Rafah. A 17-year-old boy has died after getting into trouble while swimming in the town of Wellingborough. Ronald's Abele was recovered by rescue crews yesterday after reports that he got into difficulty in open water at the embankment. Northamptonshire police say it was a tragic accident, and Ronald's family have requested privacy at this very distressing time. A police officer's been shot in the leg with a crossbow in Buckinghamshire. The officer was responding to reports of a stabbing in High Wycombe last night. He was hospitalised but has since been released. A 54-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. He was shot by an armed officer. He remains in hospital under police supervision with potentially life-changing injuries. Authorities in Ibiza and Mallorca have issued a new booze ban in an effort to crack down on what they have called excessive tourism. The sale of alcohol in shops and off licences will be banned from 9:30 in the evening until 8 a.m. in popular hotspots like Magaluf, Playa de Palma and San Anthony. And there will also be further restrictions on party boats. It's all an attempt to curb antisocial behaviour and booze-fuelled holidays following complaints from local people. And those who break the law could be fined up to £1,300. And if you're suffering a bout of regret from missing the rare display of the Northern Lights last night, well, don't worry, there's another opportunity later tonight. Aurora Borealis will be visible in the skies across many parts of the UK. It may not be quite as pronounced as it was yesterday, but should still be visible. If you're staying up, well, a couple more hours should do it. Any time after 10:30 will be best. GB News alerts are available. You can scan the QR code on your screen or go to our website for more details. That's the news. Now let's get back to the real business. Here's Mark.
Thanks, Aaron. Welcome to a busy Mark Dolan tonight. In the big story, former Labour leader Neil Kinnock says the public do not love Keir Starmer. Does it matter? Do we need to actually like those who lead us? I'll be asking Britain's best-known double act, the Hamiltons. In a Mark Meets special, World Cup winning South African captain Francois Pienaar.
Mr. Mandela would be very sad and very angry. There's certain things I hate in the movie, and then I couldn't drive home because it's too far, so I slept in the car.
The man who made history with Nelson Mandela tells his incredible story shortly. In my take at 10, why it's time for the King and the country to forgive Harry. Yes, indeed, I'll be dealing with Harry at 10 o'clock. Plus, is hard-working Princess Anne the jewel in the royal crown? Reacting to those stories and many more tonight, my top pundits, Dr. Lisa Mackenzie, Mike Reid and Mark Littlewood. Plus, the most important part of the show, your messages. They come straight to my laptop, gbnews.com/your say. And this show has a golden rule. We don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. A big 2 hours to come. Mark Dolan tonight is your perfect Saturday night in. And we start with my big opinion. Katie Price, the artist formerly known as Jordan, is never out of the headlines. Back in the day, the woman who pretty much single-handedly invented the idea of being famous for being famous adorned the front cover of Lads mags, and her questionable plastic surgery journey and romantic highs and lows have been selling papers for 2 decades. The human manifestation of an end-of-pier saucy postcard, this surgically enhanced star, who was once reportedly worth £60 million, has fallen on hard times and this weekend is on the front pages for all the wrong reasons. The press report that Katie Price has been priced out of her own home with an eviction notice served on her so-called mucky mansion estate. A star of that scale, of that fame, potentially homeless. Many will read the story with amusement, as it is human nature to enjoy watching someone tumble from their pedestal. But as someone that actually knows Katie Price pretty well, I find the story tragic. Katie and I, we used to present a show together at the music station foobar, and I found her to be a warm, entertaining and hilarious co-host. An astute media manipulator, she used to drop wild and highly personal bits of information about her private life on the show, knowing that avaricious scribblers in Fleet Street would have these revelations published in seconds. When I was working with her, she lived for the headlines and understood that fame itself was her business model. But this news of her eviction from her own home and her ongoing catastrophic finances is sad because it affects not only her, but her family, namely her 5 children, including her son Harvey, who she has nurtured through physical and mental disability. He's a great kid who has done well despite being blind and autistic. From where I was standing all those years ago, Katie Price struck me as a devoted mother. I have no reason to think that that has changed. Ultimately, I see Katie Price as the victim of an all-consuming media machine which chews up its stars and then spits them out in a manner not dissimilar to Marilyn Monroe. And as with Marilyn, the men in Katie's life haven't helped. It strikes me that many of her exes have taken more than they gave. It's my view that she was used for sex, used for money, and used for fame. Now she has been foolish, reckless, and at times her behaviour has been deeply wrong. The tax bills that haven't been paid, driving a car when she shouldn't, the drugs, the alcohol, the expensive holidays that she patently can't afford. This charismatic, cheeky, funny but flawed individual is her own worst enemy. But Katie Price is not a bad person. She, in fact, is a great British character, and I hope that she can dig herself out of this current hole. If she gets clean and finds a decent bloke, happiness is possible, and even a future career, because she is highly entertaining. Here she is, appearing on this very show last year and making headlines as usual. This comes first, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, like tonight, literally, if you saw what I've got on underneath, in fact, I haven't got anything on because I've just sorted Harvey out. The kids are out there and I'm like, kids, you've got to be quiet while I'm on
Brilliant stuff. Katie Price is nothing if not a survivor, so underestimate her at your peril. But it could go one of two ways. She may bounce back, but she may not, which worries me. Ultimately, she needs to change and change fast and escape the doom loop of bad life decisions. If she doesn't, Katie will pay the ultimate price. Your reaction, gbnews.com/your say. I'll get to your messages shortly, but first, tonight's top pundits. We have anarchist and senior lecturer Dr. Lisa Mackenzie. I'm also delighted to say we have broadcasting legend Mike Reed and political policy guru Mark Littlewood. Great to have all three of you with me in the studio. Well, Lisa, how do you solve a problem like Katie Price?
I don't think Katie Price is actually the problem. I think the problem is the way that the media, but our society sees women, actually. Katie Price is not the first woman that's been sort of sacrificed at the altar of the media. I mean, there's the film Back to Black.
Amy Winehouse.
About Amy Winehouse. You know, was she her own worst enemy? Was she the fault?
Caroline Flack, who of course took her own life.
Caroline Flack. We also had Anna Nicole Smith. You know, this is. I'm not saying it's common, but I think it is common the way that society and media treat women. You're either, I mean, you know, the amount of stick I get, too bossy, too in your face. You know.
What, when you come on this show?
Well, I come on this show, or when you know, or in real life.
Right.
As a woman, you are constantly judged.
OK, I mean, look, Mike Reed, you've been at the heart of celebrity culture for decades. Do you think there is something wrong in the media, something poisonous there?
It's difficult to know. I mean, I did The Jungle with her. We did I'm a Celebrity together when she and Peter got together and went to the wedding.
Were you chaperone? Were you matchmaker?
No, but I was there when it's all happening. And Peter said, mate, I don't think she likes me. I said, it's an old schoolyard game, Peter. She's playing hard to get. No, she doesn't like me. I said, no, trust me. Ended up at the wedding. But I think Peter
always listen to Uncle Mike. Was it a good wedding, by the way?
I went to the wedding, yeah. And then when they split up, Peter said, could you do all the TV for us? Because I really don't want to do it.
Wow.
He said, you know what happened. But I think Peter would have kept her on the straight and narrow. Peter's a very decent, very good, very hard-working guy, very talented guy. I think if they'd stuck together, he might have kept trying. I think you need another person in your life that's not, as you were saying, not somebody that's taking from her, somebody that's giving as well, somebody that's saying, look, let's sit down and talk about this, you know, the driving situation, this situation, because she can make money. I mean, she's got the book, she's got her talent, she's got appearances. There's no reason why she can't go out and make an awful lot of money, but you need a partner that's going to actually keep you on the straight and narrow, that you're going to listen to.
Is there a problem with celebrity culture, Mark, in this country? Is it exploitative? Does it chew people up and spit them out?
Well, perhaps it does, Mark, but you said in your piece at the top of the show, you know her well, I've never met her, that she's a brilliant media manipulator. Yeah. But actually, her career was largely based on her manipulating the media, not the media manipulating her. That can come back to bite you. I mean, I am very sceptical about anyone who wants to build their life around being famous for being famous, as you suggested. But she's ridden this horse, she's ridden this wave. Mike mentions her books. I was looking up, she's one of the best-selling writers of books over the last 10 years because she's famous.
She's the new
so
Charles
all
Dickens.
Of this, yeah, well, I'm not sure, possibly on quantum, not necessarily on quality. But she has, you know, she has milked this. I don't blame her for that. But it seems...
She has had more breast implants than Charles Dickens ever.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, most definitely. Oh, he was famously flat-chested. Mark, this dovetails with politics, which has become a bit of a celebrity game itself, particularly the likes of Donald Trump and Boris Johnson, who had cut through not just as politicians but as public figures.
And it's vital to do that. If you're trying to win, 14 million votes or something to win an election, you need cut-through with people. You need to be famous. Politicians need to be famous. And I know you're discussing later, do they need to be liked? They probably need to be liked, but they definitely need to be known. They need to be media manipulators too.
There you go. Well, listen, my top pundits return shortly. But next up in the big story, former Labour leader Neil Kinnock says the public do not love Keir Starmer. Does it matter? Do we need to like those who lead us? I'll be asking Britain's best-known political double act, the Hamiltons, next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Prince Harry, remember him? He appears to have fully turned his back on the UK as he listed his primary residence as the United States for the very first time in papers published yesterday. So interestingly, Harry listed the date on the formal US residency forms as the 29th of June 2023, last year. So that was the very same day he was kicked out of Frogmore Cottage in Great Windsor Park by his dad, the King. Charlotte, thank you for joining me. Okay. Are we just putting two and two together here with the significance of this date? Because there were stories during the rounds today that Harry chose that date specifically because he was so hurt about being booted out of Frogmore by his dad.
Yeah, I mean, to me it feels like he's trolling his dad a bit, because he could have said that he's been a US resident since 2020 when he quit the UK and moved to the States, but instead he chose the exact day that his dad kicked him out of Frogmore. But the reason his dad kicked him out of Frogmore was because he'd slagged off Camilla in Spare. And, you know, and his dad, apparently it was a really difficult decision for Charles, because, of course, no dad wants to kick their son out of their home. But he went beyond the pale. So Charles took the difficult decision to say, look, Frogmore's been empty for years anyway. We've spent £2.4 million doing it up for you. And now you've, you know, insulted our family in your book, Spare. Why is he so hung up on Frogmore? Because this is the country he was desperate to get away from. This is a house he didn't particularly want to live in and, in fact, didn't live in.
Well, he was forced, by the way, to pay £2.5 million to fund the renovations after it all kicked off. I mean, would that have anything to do with...
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that sort of galvanised his anger towards the whole situation. He thought he was getting a fantastic freebie. And there was, you know, there were a few reports at the time that Meghan actually thought she was moving into Frogmore House, which is a much grander property. And she sort of felt a bit sort of tricked or confused and hadn't quite realised it was actually a cottage, which is only a mere, I think it was only a mere 8 bedrooms.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, the reality star Katie Price is to face eviction from her mucky mansion. I know Katie Price very well. We did a radio show together. I think it's very sad and says a lot about how the media chews up celebrities and spits them out, but not too much sympathy on the message board at gbnews.com/your say. Katie Price says Helen has been bankrupt so many times, yet she always has money to splash. Maybe she does not need help. Personally, I think that she's a victim of her own making. That's from Helen, who is a GB News member. Also, I've already got tongues wagging about my take at 10. Yes, in 40 minutes' time, I'll be tackling Prince Harry. I think it's time for the King and the country to forgive Harry. But already you're getting in there early with your disagreements. Hi, Mark. I think that the royal family are currently absolutely right to keep their distance from Prince Harry. Sadly, he cannot be trusted, and as long as his situation remains, it is best he stays in the USA. Well, I'll be tackling Harry at 10 o'clock in my take at 10. You won't want to miss it. But lots more to get through. It's time for the big story. And this evening, the former leader of the Labour Party, Neil Kinnock, has cast some doubt on Labour's chances at the next election. Whilst he said he remains hopeful for a positive result, the public haven't made their mind up about the party and don't love Sir Keir Starmer yet. But does that matter? Do we need to like those who lead us? Let's get reaction from my pundits before we speak to the Hamiltons. We've got the brilliant broadcaster and academic Dr. Lisa Mackenzie, Mike Reid and Mark Littlewood. What do you think about this, Mark? Do we need to love our leaders?
You don't need to love them or like them, Mark, but I think you probably need to respect them and trust them. But the other thing to bear in mind is, of course, politics is basically a zero-sum game. You'll find that elections are often not won by somebody who's loved or admired, but simply by the candidate who's disliked the least. And it seems to me that this is pretty much Keir Starmer's and the Labour Party's strategy. It's a bit like a football match between two very poor teams. One of them is still going to win. And Keir Starmer doesn't need to be liked to be Prime Minister. He just needs to be more respected and trusted than Rishi Sunak. That's the only thing that will be on his mind.
Mike Reid, do you think politicians have to be loved, or do they just have to be good at their job?
I think everybody likes to be loved, don't they? I think if you go to a restaurant that serves great food, you love the food, but if the restaurateur is ghastly, you probably don't go back. So I think it is good to be loved if you're at the helm of something. It certainly helps. It certainly helps galvanise the people around you. As I've always said, the best captain is not necessarily the best batsman or bowler or a highest goal scorer. It's the one that galvanises the rest of the team, and the rest of the team want to get behind them and believe in them, like a Robert E. Lee or somebody like that. You actually inspire the people around you. That's what you need.
OK, now the good news is the Hamiltons are ready to go. But Lisa, before I speak to Neil and Christine, do you think that Keir Starmer's lack of popularity as an individual could do for him at the next election?
I don't think it's going to do for him, but I actually agree with Neil Kinnock. He's not loved. I don't think he's even liked. I'm not sure how much the Labour Party is even liked, but they are less despised than the Tories.
Well, that's certainly one way of putting it. Let's get reaction now from Britain's best-known political double act, the extremely lovable Hamiltons, Neil and Christine. Now, Neil, you've been in politics for a long time. You're currently leader, Neil, of a national political party, UKIP. Do leaders need to be loved?
Well, it helps, I suppose, but I don't think a desire to be loved is going to be in the forefront of the mind of a successful leader. In politics, what really matters is the ideas you've got and the way you execute them and whether you improve people's lives and they then recognise what you've done for them. And Margaret Thatcher didn't obsess about being liked and loved, but she changed the world or helped to change the world. John Major did obsess about being liked and loved, and he was a complete and utter flop. But in the case of Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, neither of them has the slightest connection with the ordinary voter. The ordinary voter thinks they're both completely irrelevant. They're kind of celluloid characters, or rather they're more particularly they're holograms, so you can put your hand right through them as far as most people are concerned. They're charisma-free zones.
Well, definitely. I want to ask you, Christine, what is more important in politics and in government, competence or charisma?
Well, that's a difficult question. Whether it's competence or to be liked, there's no question. Obviously, it's competence. But competence or charisma, if you've got both, then you've got it made. And the last person who had both was Margaret Thatcher, in my view. And actually, Tony Blair had it. Tony Blair had competence and charisma. I didn't agree, sorry, with a lot of what he did, but he was, for his purposes, he was competent and charismatic. Now, I mean, we've got solid porridge, haven't we? I mean, does Rishi Sunak inspire you to do anything, to go out and fight for your country? Not really. Does Starmer? No. Starmer's not going to win on either people believing in his competence or people attracted by his charisma. Starmer is going to win, as he probably will, because people don't want Rishi. It's time for a change, and that is an incredibly powerful force. Time for a change, and Starmer, who, frankly, he's almost a charisma-free zone. The people with charisma in the Labour Party are, I mean, frankly, let's be honest, they're the people like Angela Rayner, and I'm not quite sure what's happened to her, by the way, on the House front. Any news on that?
Still waiting. Day 377 of that particular drama. Of course, supporters of Keir Starmer would argue he's incredibly loved, he's incredibly popular. Just look at those opinion polls. Now, Neil, you served under Margaret Thatcher from 1983. She wasn't always loved. She was a controversial figure, but she won 3 elections with a landslide. What does that tell us?
Well, it tells us that, given the circumstances in which those elections were fought, the end of the Cold War, she managed to transform the British economy by taming the unions, by cutting taxes, doing all the things that traditionally the Tories are expected to do. The trouble with this lot is they've not acted like Conservatives at all. They completely failed right across the political landscape.
And Neil, just to interrupt you, I'm old enough to remember when Margaret Thatcher was in power, and she was willing to be unpopular, and she was unpopular between elections, and her ratings often fell very low, but it didn't seem to impact the outcome.
No, well, that's absolutely right. After the 1979 election, the government changed course dramatically from the winter of discontent and the utter failure of the 1970s under Heath and then Wilson and then Callaghan. And it wasn't until the Falklands War that the opinion polls turned decisively in Margaret Thatcher's favour. In 1981, famously, there were 364 world-famous economists who said that the government was completely wrong about the policies that they were pursuing. And within days, I suppose, they were disproved. And then the Falklands War happened in 1983. She won with a majority of 144. I was one of those who was part of that majority. And again, in 87, she won another famous victory. But, she didn't really, she wasn't entirely uncalculating as a politician, obviously, but she ultimately knew what the most important things were to achieve, and she pursued those objectives against every possible abuse and imprecation that was thrown at her. And that's what we lack with our current generation of politicians. They're obsessing about social media, obsessing about opinion polls. They're obsessing about whatever happens to be the latest fashion. We don't. What is the difference actually between the modern Conservative Party and Keir Starmer's Labour Party? I mean, Starmer has thrown every possible Labour policy overboard so that he can fight the election on no policies at all. And the Conservative Party has virtually no policies either. So there's really no difference between the two parties. There is no choice. That's democracy.
Christine, I've only got a couple of seconds left. I don't think Keir Starmer is loved yet, but Neil Hamilton, very loved in the country and at home. What's his secret?
Oh, don't be absurd, Mark. We are very aware that we're Marmite, for heaven's sake.
I don't think so. I think you're strawberry jam.
No, I'm Bovril.
Shut up. He's had his turn.
I thought he said I'm bog roll. You're not that bad.
No, he did. He doesn't understand the Marmite.
Bovril.
He is loved most of the time. So we'll leave it. I think we better leave it at that.
Christine, great to see you. Neil, Christina, we'll catch up soon. The Hamiltons there, suggesting that actually Keir Starmer is not very popular, but will still likely win the next election. Let me know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. Next up, as the BBC protects a sculpture made by a paedophile, can you separate art from the artist? And is it okay to still enjoy the work of people who have gone on to become disgraced? We'll debate that next.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Looking ahead to tonight, most of us it should be dry. And that gives us another opportunity to see the northern lights. So at the moment we have got high pressure clinging on, but that will move towards the continent as we go through the next few days, heralding a change to the weather. But before we get there, plenty of clear skies tonight away from the eastern seaboard. So yeah, an excellent opportunity to see the northern lights, especially across more northern parts of the country. And despite the clear skies, it's going to be a mild night for most of us. Temperatures in towns and cities firmly in double figures. So for most of us, a bright start on Sunday morning. Quite murky across some northern and eastern areas, but the low cloud will gradually burn its way back towards the North Sea. Showers breaking out fairly early on across parts of Northern Ireland, and then as the day goes on, parts of Scotland, Wales, England, down towards the very far southwest, seeing a few thunderstorms developing. Some of these will be torrential. Warnings are in force as we go through the course of Sunday. In the sunshine, though, temperatures reaching 27 degrees. But then on to Monday, another band of rain moves in from the southwest. It takes a fair time to get anywhere further north than Wales in the southwest. So for the rest of us, it's a day of sunny spells and scattered showers. That sets us up for a fairly changeable middle part of the week, with temperatures returning to something a little bit near normal for the time of year.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. Listen, don't forget that at 10 o'clock, I'll be tackling the Prince Harry story. I think the punishment beatings have got to stop. I think it's time for the King and the country to forgive Harry. You don't agree. Strong opinions already coming in on email. We haven't had the take at 10 yet, but this from Graham, who says when Harry came over straight after finding out about his father, it was Meghan that sent him over. Jean says, Mark, of course we should forgive Harry and Meghan. And Sandra says, Harry and his wife made their choice and should stay in America. The King has made the right decision. Well, it's all things Harry for my take at 10 in just half an hour's time. And don't forget, iconic South African rugby superstar Francois Pienaar, the man who made history with Nelson Mandela, is my Mark Meets guest in a couple of minutes. But first, the BBC has sparked controversy by moving to protect a controversial statue by paedophile sculptor Eric Gill after it was vandalised. The Daily Mail newspaper revealed that the bosses at the corporations have lodged a planning application for a protective screen after carrying out costly repairs to the Prospero and Ariel carving. The statue, which is displayed on the outside of the BBC's London headquarters, has been attacked by protesters twice in the last 2 years. So is it wrong to attack the statue, given that it was created by a paedophile? Should it remain? Can you separate art from the artist? And is it OK to still enjoy the work of people who have gone on to become disgraced? Let's ask my top pundits, Lisa McKenzie, Mike Reid and Mark Littlewood. Mike, what do you think about this? You were at the Beeb for many years. You've walked past that statue hundreds of times.
Yeah, but they must have had access to those diaries since 1940. So, and now it's 2024. Is it just a thing? For example, you know, when Oscar was transported back from Reading Jail, people were throwing things at him on the platform.
Oscar Wilde.
Yeah, and they were chucking things at. That wouldn't happen now, but it's where you get on and off the roundabout, I think. It's separating, you know, the art from the artist. Now, if they discovered that a guy that designed 50 high-rise blocks was a paedophile, would they pull the blocks down? If they discovered the guy that tarmacked most of the roads in England was a paedophile, would they pull the roads up? No, of course they wouldn't.
Do you think it's OK to still enjoy those sculptures because they are iconic and world famous?
I don't know whether people enjoy them. I'd have probably walked in and not noticed, to be honest. Right. Whether people actually enjoy a sculpture, whether it just happens to be there, I don't know.
Mark Littlewood, are you still enjoying Gary Glitter's greatest hits?
Well, this is the thing. I was going to say you can always split the art from the artist, but I think in some cases that's pretty tricky, right? For a singer, for example, right? Or a brilliantly charismatic television presenter.
God bless you.
You can't really split your art from you. But in the case of sculpture, yes, for sure. And there's another character, historical character, comes to mind for me. H.P. Lovecraft was a horror writer 100 years ago. By some measurement, the best horror writer of all time. To say that he has somewhat unfashionable and controversial views on race would be an understatement. But the idea we should ban this horror literature, which has just influenced that part of culture for over 100 years, is crazy. So sculpture, sculpting, writing, it seems to me you can split the art from the artist. Singing, television presenting, a little harder.
I see. What do you think about this, Lisa?
Well, I read a book about Eric Gill, actually. I was just interested in him. And, you know, he did write in detail what he was doing to his daughters. And actually, that statue is often protested by Tommy Robinson. It's Tommy Robinson that usually protests against that statue. What do I think? Well, I was recently in Vienna. I was at a conference, and there was a statue of the past mayor, who was the mayor, and he was happily exporting Jews out of Vienna.
Right.
And what they've done with that statue is they've left it. People have...
He sent Jews to their certain death.
Yeah, I mean, and they've got sort of a plaque next to it saying this is whoever he was. He was the mayor. He was a fascist. He was anti-Semite. He sent Jews to their death. And they also put, however, he really loved the Austrian countryside and was very good at looking after the countryside.
Yeah.
So they'd got this plaque.
He was great with children and dogs.
But they got this plaque, and then people had sort of defaced it and written things on it. And I thought that was a much better way, because you got to make your own mind up about that.
Yeah, a terrible fascist, but a lovely singing voice. Mike Reid, Would you play Michael Jackson if you were on the radio this weekend?
Jackson hasn't been convicted of anything, as far as I know.
What about the sort of reputation that he had on his passing?
I don't think you can judge a reputation. Otherwise, you know, we start becoming what we hate other countries for. You know, so you start eradicating your own history, and we used to point a finger at Russia for doing that, and now we started doing it. He hasn't been convicted, he hasn't been charged. He might just be one of those people that's a child himself. I don't know. With Gary Glitter, we did a programme once, and the conclusion was, we love the music, but we don't like the guy very much.
Right. Was that before the revelations came out?
Oh, no, it was after the revelations.
After.
When people said, why don't you play Gary Glitter? Because the music's good. And the opinion of most of the listeners was, we don't like the man, but we do like the music.
But briefly, Gary Glitter still makes many thousands of pounds in royalties around the world, doesn't he? I don't think he's played much here in the UK, but abroad he's still popular. Is that ethically a problem, do you think, Mike?
Well, if they're playing it, you can't stop. You can't tell other countries.
Should his music be on these streaming platforms?
That's a difficult one, because all those giant companies, the YouTubes and the Googles and what have you, are their own masters.
What do you think?
Well, Oasis sampled Gary Glitter's. And so he gets paid every time that song is played.
OK.
And also, let's just throw this other thing in, is do we still use Eric Gill's font?
OK, so, that's an important question. But listen, folks, coming up in My Take at 10, why it's time for the King and the country to forgive Prince Harry, plus his hard-working princess Anne, the jewel in the royal crown. But next, in a Mark Mead special, the man who made history with Nelson Mandela World Cup hero Francois Pienaar.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Scotland, home of Humza Yousaf's hate crime law, aka the Clype's Charter.
Clype, a delightfully Scottish word for a grass, a snitch, or in the context of Russell Finley's opening gambit during the hate crime debate at Holyrood last week, reporting your friends, family and neighbours to the police for alleged hate crimes. The SNP responded by doubling down on the new law's ability to protect vulnerable victims.
I am confident that we have robust legislation that will protect those who are vulnerable to harm.
But other victims are emerging in the wake of this new legislation. As the bill moved through Parliament, concerns rose of police inundated with vexatious complaints, targeting individuals who had committed no crimes. The first fortnight of the new law gave rise to nearly 9,000 complaints.
The vast majority, at least 95%, have been deemed not to be crimes.
False reporting is nothing new. A social post from Scottish Conservative Murdo Fraser was flagged by a trans rights activist in November.
Police decided that no crime had been committed, but nevertheless that was recorded as a non-crime hate incident.
And Alba Westminster leader Neil Hanvey says he too has been targeted under pre-existing legislation.
I've been the victim of at least one of those complaints, and you know that's taken up the time of police officers.
Thick skin can be expected of our elected officials, but what about the public? 74-year-old Morag McDougall-Brown says she was reported to police by a neighbour, and the experience has taken its toll.
I hate to think that anybody like me or similar to my age would ever have to go through this, because I really don't think I will ever go over it.
Sunday nights on GB News. From 6, Neil Oliver. At 7, it's Free Speech Nation with Andrew Doyle. At 9, Mark Dolan. And at 11, get set for the week ahead with headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In just 20 minutes' time, in my take at 10, why it's time for the King and the country to forgive Prince Harry. Plus, is hard-working Princess Anne the jewel in the royal crown? But first, Mark Meets. And this evening, legendary South African rugby player Francois Pienaar, who played flanker for the Springboks from 1993 until 1996, winning 29 international caps, all of them as captain. In one of many career highlights, Pienaar led South Africa to victory in the 1995 Rugby World Cup. One of the iconic moments of that victory was South African President Nelson Mandela wearing a Springboks jersey bearing Pienaar's number, presenting him with the Webb Ellis Cup, demonstrating just how far South Africa had come since the years of apartheid. Well, I caught up with the great man earlier. Francois Pienaar, welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. Tell me about your childhood growing up in South Africa and how that shaped the person you became.
I was born in Vereniging, which is an industrial town just south of Johannesburg. My dad was a steel worker. So we grew up in the steel belt, and there were three towns there called the Vaal Triangle. Now, Vereniging van der Bijlpark and Sasolburg was part of that Vaal Triangle. So I grew up in that area, went to an all-white school, spoke predominantly Afrikaans. Of course, we had English as a subject, but our English was just very poor. And I grew up, playing sports and studying in this apartheid South Africa that I was oblivious of as a young kid.
Let's go back to that World Cup victory in 1995. South Africa were the underdogs, weren't they?
I don't actually like that because I don't think we were. I think people were mistaken how quickly we grew as a team, bearing in mind that we were not allowed to play international rugby because of the bans, because of apartheid, understandably so. But we learned quickly. We were divided in South Africa quite a bit in terms of culture. And I mentioned the Afrikaners, the English also played rugby and so forth. So we needed to understand how to play together and form a united culture, because you can't win any World Cup if you don't have a dominant, strong culture where people know each other and have been successful. So the team that formed the nucleus of that 95 team, I was fortunate enough to captain all the Lions. And we were very successful leading up to the World Cup. But the global media didn't make us favourites. We were not even given a chance to make the quarterfinals.
Let's talk about that moment that Mandela presented you with the Webb Ellis Cup. Why was it so significant?
That's the most special moment ever for a sportsman. And I was just so blessed. Mr. Mandela, everybody knows his story. I was fortunate enough to form a relationship with him. And when he handed me the trophy, it was just, the words were crazy. He said to me, "Thank you, Francois, for what you've done for the country." And I said to him, "No, thank you, Mr. Mandela. What you have done for the country." I mean, exactly the same words. And I wanted to hug him. I should have. It was so emotional. I mean, I'll never forget his smile. And here's this man that was in prison for 27 years, comes out and has forgiveness in his heart and embraces the sport that was the white man's sport under apartheid. And the stories are well told that when a team came to play, if England came to play South Africa, the non-white people would definitely not support the Springboks. They would support the opposition. And because of him and because of that whole World Cup, things changed. It was crazy what happened after the final whistle, and months and years and almost, 29 years later, I'm still reminded on a daily basis of how special that day was for South Africa.
You've even had a film made about you, the Clint Eastwood movie Invictus, and you were played by Matt Damon, no less. Were you happy with that casting?
Of course.
I think you're much more handsome than he is.
Thank you so much for that. I had the pleasure of meeting him, Morgan Freeman, and Clint Eastwood. I had no influence in the movie whatsoever, but just got to know them. And there's certain things I hate in the movie, and there's certain things I really like. But we can't give Mr. Mandela enough credit. It wasn't for him, the country would not have been united. I mean, the scenes I've seen afterwards, we were in the changing room. In those days, you didn't warm up on the field. It was still the amateur days, so you got stuck in this sweaty, deep heat infested changing room waiting for the game, and you're so anxious to go on, and you would hear the shouting outside. And that stadium was packed predominantly by 99.9% by white South Africans, predominantly Afrikaners. And I've seen the videos afterwards. We didn't experience that when Mr. Mandela walked out and that whole crowd shouted his name, Nelson, Nelson, Nelson. It's extraordinary. It's amazing.
You've said that you were shielded from it when you were young. So at what point did you realise that apartheid was happening?
As you say, as a kid, you insulated. The culture was that you were never part of the conversation. Children were seen playing in the garden and never heard. You never were part of that conversation. So when I went to university, then it was South Africa was a powder keg. It was in the mid to late 80s. And the students came, an uprising. There was a lot of debates and disagreements and anger amongst white South Africans. And this is something I experienced for the first time. And you think about these things and you start participating in these conversations. I mean, I still don't know why. In 1986, I went to coach a black team in Soweto, Jabulani High School. I just wanted to do this and understand and see where South Africa is going. And the conversations were about Mr. Mandela. He's going to be released from prison. And that just divided the white South Africans. So it was bizarre. It was scary. And it was needed because South Africa needed to change. Now, how lucky am I? And I'm a student, and then I get to play for my country, and then there's a World Cup that comes to South Africa. I get an opportunity to meet one of the greatest leaders the world has ever seen when he became president 30 years ago. I think yesterday, 30 years ago, he became president of South Africa. And to share a platform where he hands me this trophy and say those words, it's just, I'm very much probably the most fortunate, blessed sportsman.
After your success with the South African national team, you came over to the UK, where you became player coach at Saracens, and you had plenty of success, a trophy and several strong league performances. How did you adapt to life in Britain?
It was tough because, we came from an amateur era. We got paid money in an envelope after the game. There was always these rumors going around that we were on contracts as such. So we got a stipend after the match, which was for a student quite a bit. So you could take a lady out to dinner and buy a beer or a glass of wine. But our facilities, it's incredible. I mean, really incredible. It's world class. And I arrive, I don't know where to stay. People suggest Surrey is a nice place, so we rented a place in Surrey. Didn't do my homework. Saracens, we're training at Branby Road in Enfield at 10 in the morning and at 7 at night. So I had to leave before 7 to take the M25. Then I arrive at where they say Saracens is. So there's a couple of fields and a shed. And I stopped and I said, "Where's Saracens?" I said, "No, this is Saracens." What? And we had to go and people were walking their dogs on the rugby fields before the training, so we had to go and clean. It's like you can't make this up. And then I couldn't drive home because it's too far, so I slept in the car over lunch, drove around a bit to see the area, and then the clouds opened up. I mean, it started bucketing down with rain. The field was muddy even before training, and then you train in this mud, and then you go and shower, and it was like 4 little shower heads, like in a toilet chain. And I just decided, no, I can't do this. I got into the car with my muddy clothes and drove back all the way M25. I got back at about 11:30. So that wasn't a nice start. It was tough. It was tough adapting, but we did. We met some incredible people, had some incredible times, and just that was a journey that taught me so much about life and about people. I'm becoming one of the first ever player coaches was not easy. How do you do this? So we've made great friends there. Our children were born there. We loved London. I mean, we absolutely loved London. It's such a special place that you can do so much.
Now, Francois, I understand that you are once again living in your native South Africa. Is the promise of Nelson Mandela and his legacy being fulfilled?
No.
Why not?
Because the ANC is failing the people of South Africa. It's as simple as that.
Is it a question of political corruption or incompetence or both?
There's a list. Definitely corruption is part of it. Kleptocrats. Why is nobody in jail? You know, the Zondo Commission fingered a lot of corruption and nobody's in jail. The poor people of our country is suffering. So Mr. Mandela would be very sad and very angry.
Now, you are a towering figure in sporting terms and in cultural terms. What is next for you? Do you have any unfinished business?
Getting old.
You don't look old.
Getting old. I've got a foundation that I started. It's Mandela-esque. I started it 21 years ago. That is my passion, but I still have my businesses in South Africa. One of it's actually doing really well in unearthing talent. So we started the university rugby competition 16 years ago. And 50% of the players that played in last year's Rugby World Cup winning team, the Springbok winning team, played in the competition that we started. So that is wonderful to see how that grows. So I go to work in the morning and come back in the evenings. And on weekends, what we do in South Africa, when it's not raining, we have a barbecue.
Francois Pienaar, thank you so much for joining us on Mark Dolan tonight. What a humbling interview. Such an interesting guy who is a cultural and sporting figure. And that moment with him and Mandela at the final was it was truly epic. And what a shame what's happened to South Africa in the years since. Now, coming up in the 10 o'clock hour, tomorrow's papers hot off the press. And in my take at 10, why it's time for the King and the country to forgive Prince Harry. Plus, is hard-working Princess Anne the jewel in the royal crown? See you in 2.
Warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Looking ahead to tonight, most of us it should be dry, and that gives us another opportunity to see the northern lights. So at the moment we have got high pressure clinging on, but that will move towards the continent as we go through the next few days, heralding a change to the weather. But before we get there, plenty of clear skies tonight away from the eastern seaboard. So yeah, an excellent opportunity to see the northern lights, especially across more northern parts of the country. And despite the clear skies, it's going to be a mild night for most of us. Temperatures in towns and cities firmly in double figures. So for most of us, a bright start on Sunday morning. Quite murky across some northern and eastern areas, but the low cloud will gradually burn its way back towards the North Sea. Showers breaking out fairly early on across parts of Northern Ireland, and then as the day goes on, parts of Scotland, Wales, England, down towards the very far southwest, seeing a few thunderstorms developing. Some of these will be torrential. Warnings are in force as we go through the course of Sunday. In the sunshine, though, temperatures reaching 27 degrees. But then on to Monday, another band of rain moves in from the southwest. It takes a fair time to get anywhere further north than Wales in the southwest. So for the rest of us, it's a day of sunny spells and scattered showers. That sets us up for a fairly changeable middle part of the week, with temperatures returning to something a little bit near normal for the time of year.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. A totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online. In the United Kingdom and across the world, this is Mark Dolan Tonight. Why it's time for the King and the country to forgive Prince Harry. Plus, is hard-working Princess Anne the jewel in the royal crown? And I'll get reaction from the Queen of US royal reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Also tonight, we will discuss Princess Anne. Do you think she should be upgraded by the King to a more senior role? Is she the finest figure in the royal family since the late, great Queen Elizabeth II? Also tonight, in The Last Word, legendary Coronation Street actor Charlie Lawson will be looking at the big stories of the day and giving it both barrels. A packed show, lots to get through. Prince Harry next in my Take at 10. You won't want to miss it. I'm not pulling my punches, but first the news headlines and Aaron Armstrong.
Hello, very good evening to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong. Tory defector Natalie Elphick's been accused of lobbying the Justice Secretary in 2020 to interfere in her then-husband's criminal sex offences trial. Sir Robert Buckland told the Sunday Times the MP approached him when he was Lord Chancellor and Justice Secretary ahead of Charlie Elphick's hearing. She allegedly told Sir Robert it was unfair the case was the first to be heard in court after the COVID lockdown and that it was being overseen by Lady Justice Whipple. A Labour Party spokesman has said she totally rejects the characterisation of the meeting. United by music, that's the Eurovision slogan, but the build-up to tonight's final has been anything but united amid allegations inside the arena and protests outside. The Netherlands entry, Joost Klein's been disqualified. The Dutch broadcaster says it was over a threatening movement he made towards someone filming him, someone from the production team, reportedly against his wishes. Ireland's entrant, Bambi Thug, has accused the Israeli broadcaster Khan of repeatedly breaking the rules regarding its commentary towards their act during the semi-finals. And the French act, Slimane, has broken Eurovision rules on making political statements. It was done during the warm-up with an on-stage speech calling for peace. Meanwhile, outside, pro-Palestinian demonstrators have once again been gathering in Malmo, and they've been outside the arena too to protest about Israel's participation in the contest. They've been heard shouting "Free Palestine" and "Shame" towards fans heading into the venue. Several protesters, including the activist Greta Thunberg, have been forcibly detained and taken away by police. Tens of thousands of Palestinians have been fleeing Rafah in anticipation of an expected Israeli assault on southern Gaza. Long lines have been seen on roads leading out of Rafah, with people carrying possessions and taking any mode of transport available. Now, they've been told to move to a so-called expanded humanitarian zone on the west coast. It's prompted fears of a wider invasion of Rafah, despite calls for restraint from the UN, the UK and other allies, and humanitarian organisations. Elsewhere, residents in northern Gaza have also been told to evacuate, signalling fresh offensives against Hamas months after the IDF declared victory in the area. A 17-year-old boy has died after getting into trouble while swimming in the town of Wellingborough. Ronald's Abele was recovered by rescue crews yesterday after getting into difficulty in open water at the embankment. Northamptonshire police say it was a tragic accident and Ronald's family have requested privacy at this distressing time. A police officer has been shot in the leg with a crossbow in Buckinghamshire. The officer was responding to reports of a stabbing in High Wycombe last night. He was hospitalised but has since been released. A 54-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder and was shot by an armed officer. He's now in hospital under police supervision with potentially life-changing injuries. Now, British holidaymakers heading to Mallorca or Ibiza this summer may have to rethink their plans, or at least their alcohol consumption. Authorities on parts of the Balearic Islands are trying to crack down on excessive drinking and boozy behaviour in some of the tourist hotspots by banning off sales of alcohol from 9:30 in the evening to 8 a.m. Authorities have also banned party boats from sailing within 1 nautical mile of certain destinations. Now, the move is in response to complaints by locals in Magaluf, San Antonio and Playa de Palma. Finally, if you're regretting missing last night's display of the Northern Lights, well, don't worry. In about half an hour, you'll have another opportunity. Aurora Borealis will be visible once again across the UK. It may not be quite as pronounced as it was yesterday. The advice: bring your phone, make sure you get your settings right to take the picture. That's how you'll see it best. And any time after 10:30 should be good. You can keep up to date with all of our stories by scanning the QR code on your screen for GB News alerts. Our website also has the details. Now it's back to Mark.
My thanks to Aaron Armstrong, who is absolutely furious this evening because he's had to cancel his holiday to Magaluf. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. Is Princess Anne the jewel in the royal crown? I'll be asking Queen of Royal Reporting, Kinsey Schofield. And in the last word, legendary Coronation Street actor Charlie Lawson will be looking at the big stories of the day and giving it both barrels. And reacting to the big stories of the night, Dr. Lisa McKenzie, Mike Reid and Mark Littlewood. Plus, Sunday's front pages, a packed hour. Those papers are on their way, but first, my take at 10. God knows Prince Harry and I have had our differences. We know how he has behaved over the last few years. He's been guilty of immaturity, selfishness and treachery. And whilst all men should take responsibility in life and face the consequences of their actions, I feel, in the case of Harry Windsor, the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction. And now Prince Harry is being overly punished. Yes, the book Spare was an egregious assault on his own family for money. The Oprah Winfrey interview was a slander on our monarchy, particularly the wild accusation of racism on which the Sussexes later backtracked. Of course they did. The podcast interview in which Harry more or less said that Charles was a rubbish dad was needless and hurtful and untrue. Charles did his best under difficult circumstances. Harry shared intimate details about a fight with his own brother, which should have stayed behind four walls. He described his elegant and dignified stepmother, Queen Camilla, as dangerous and a villain. And he has waged a war on our world-renowned free press. There's nothing more unseemly than an out-of-touch wealthy aristocrat trying to silence our revered national newspaper titles. Who is Harry to do that? This is a man born into a world of untold privilege and fortune purely because he was conceived in the right womb. He won the uterus lottery, but he is not above scrutiny. And I've had a bit of heat for calling out Harry and Meghan in the past for their appalling behaviour. Well, forgive me for holding powerful public figures to account. I didn't realise that millionaire actresses and princes were the latest protected class. Well, they're not protected here. Not on my watch. But at this moment in time, I'm beginning to feel protective of Harry himself. I'm deeply shocked that on his visit to the UK this week for a service to celebrate 10 years of the Invictus Games and an inspiring event that he founded, Harry was not granted an audience with his own father. Now Charles is battling cancer. How must Harry feel not to be able to give his own dad a hug and ask him about his progress? Harry might be old school, wanting to pop round with a bottle of Lucozade and a bag of grapes just to cheer the old man up. For Charles to snub his own son in this way strikes me as a punishment disproportionate to the crime. How ill is Charles? I'm praying for a speedy recovery, but God knows how long they've got left together. None of us have got long, really. Life is short. And in a needless slight to his youngest son, Charles has reportedly reduced Harry to tears by granting a military aviation honour on William, even though it's Harry who famously flew planes in 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan. Talk about kicking a guy when he's down. And why hasn't Charles stepped in to make sure that his own son is safe and has top-level armed royal security when he's in Britain? Yes, Harry walked away from his country and the monarchy and his public role. But at no point did Harry choose to be the king's son, which sadly does make him a target. The court of public opinion has ruled on Harry, and he has served his punishment, with his reputation in this country in tatters and something of a laughingstock in the United States. Trapped in a relationship which looks more like a hostage situation than a marriage, Harry has paid a mighty price. He's lost his family, he's lost his country, and now he doesn't even have a proper bodyguard when he travels around London. I worry for Harry's safety, and I worry for his sanity too. I think he's suffered enough, and his mental and physical well-being is now a priority. After all, this is the same human being who had to follow his mother's hearse at her own funeral at the age of just 12. I admire the King greatly, but it was wrong not to see Harry this week. William is consumed with rage, which I fear will never dissipate. That's brothers for you. But Charles, as Harry's father and the head of the family, should know better. It's time for the King and the country to forgive Prince Harry. The war in Gaza is like a minor scuffle compared to what's happening in the royal family at the moment. My message to Charles is a simple one. Declare a ceasefire. Meet the enemy. Build a future together and give peace a chance. What you don't do is tell your own son to peace off. Your reaction, gbnews.com/your say. I suspect many of you won't agree. I'll get to your views in just a moment. But first, my top pundits. Anarchist and senior lecturer Dr. Lisa Mackenzie, broadcasting legend Mike Reed, and the brilliant, exceptional policy guru, Mark Littlewood. Let me start with you, Mark. What do you think? I believe that the punishment beatings on Prince Harry have got to stop.
You're far too forgiving a man, Mark, if I may say so. Far too forgiving, far too nice. Look, I don't think that forgiveness should be never given, but has he done anything to seek forgiveness? Has he offered a full apology to his family, to his brother, to the king. Not at all. And I think until Harry makes that move and apologises and actually says, I wish to bring things back together, then the king has precious little choice. You've just said brilliantly all of the damage that he has caused the royal family to his own monetary gain and benefit, from which he can presumably pay for his own security guards. So I would like to see this patched up, but I think the first move has to come from Harry, not from the king, and he seems extremely unwilling to make that first move, as does his wife.
But just on a human level, Lisa Mackenzie, this is Prince Harry, whose father is battling cancer. He comes to the capital. They're 3 miles apart and they don't meet.
Well, welcome to families. That's what happens in, that's what happens in lots of families. But I am torn on this. As you know, I'm a Republican. I don't want these people... I don't want them as leaders as the UK.
You don't want them larging it in palaces at the taxpayers' expense?
No, not at all. So I'm torn. On one hand, I'm glad that we got rid of 2 of them to America. I think more should go. On the other hand, let him come back because he's a walking hand grenade. I mean, he could do more damage to the royal family than the IRA would have ever dreamed of, actually. So perhaps let him back and sort of let him and his wife do what they do best and sort of upset everybody in there. So I mean, I'm torn really.
Yeah, I quite like your idea of shipping the minor royals off to the United States. They could probably just walk across the border in the south. But let me ask you what you think about this, Mike Reid, because I think blood is thicker than water. I think it's time for forgiveness, particularly given that a key family member, King Charles, is gravely unwell.
Yeah, well, Lisa will be in the Tower by midnight. Clearly, as a leading Republican,
which is not a pub, by the way.
Yeah, we talk about him as a pariah. If we'd had television back in the days of Henry VIII, we'd be discussing the tens of thousands of deaths that he was responsible for. I'm not sure about the word forgiveness. I'm not sure what there is actually to forgive. I think, like any family, they should sit down and have a conversation. Nothing to do with us, but William and Charles and Harry sit down and have a sensible conversation as adults. How do you come back? How do you fit in? What do you do? Yeah. Where are you going to work with the military again? Have a sensible conversation, not an instant, you're forgiven, come back, now what do you... Have a proper family conversation about it.
Mike Reid, briefly, do you think King Charles was wrong not to meet his son this week?
He was wrong what, sorry?
Not to meet his son this week.
It's difficult to criticise someone else, say whether they were wrong or whether they were right. You have to make a decision. You have advisors. It's difficult for us to
Big Mark Littlewood, I don't need advisors to meet my kids. If I was ill, they'll be visiting me.
That's reasonable. That's your decision to take.
And I will be king one day, so watch out.
well, no doubt you'll be.
Don't worry, you'll be collecting the taxes.
I'd like to see a civil war between the Walesers and the Sussexes.
But the point is this, isn't it? Harry shot first. If you want a ceasefire, he needs to be the one.
Oh my goodness. Well, listen, folks, we've got more reaction to my take at 10 with the Queen of Royal reporting Kinsey Schofield, plus lots of other big stories from the United States. And is Princess Anne the jewel in the royal crown? Does she deserve a royal upgrade? We'll discuss all of that next.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Between 1955 and 1989, an average of 55 nuclear tests were conducted across the globe each year. More than 30,000 young British and Commonwealth servicemen served at British test locations in Australia and the Pacific Ocean. But in the years since, those who were involved say they've been ignored and lied to about their exposure to radiation. For decades, Lab Rats International has represented the millions across the world exposed to fallout from the testing programmes and the families who still suffer today from illness and deformities. Last year, the government unveiled the Nuclear Test Medal, recognising the military, civilian and overseas staff and personnel who participated in Britain's nuclear testing programme in the 1950s. But for Lab Rats founder Alan Owen, whose own father was a nuclear test veteran, the work is only just beginning. In September, they launched a legal challenge to the Ministry of Defence to provide the test veterans full medical records, which they say they've been denied access to.
We sit in this bubble as the nuclear test veteran community, fighting against the establishment. And they will say, you know, ministers will go in Parliament and say, all you've got to do is apply for your medical records and they'll give them to you. You know, it just doesn't happen. It's not a reality. They're not there to as easy, as accessible as just applying. They will fight you all the way. They will delay it.
In response, a government spokesperson said, "We are grateful to all service personnel who participated in the British nuclear testing programme, which is why we have formally recognised them with an official medal. Nuclear test veterans who believe they have suffered ill health due to service have the existing and long-standing right to apply for no-fault compensation under the War Pension Scheme. The fight for these veterans and their families lives on, because thousands who came before never got the recognition and justice for their service."
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Well, a huge reaction to my take at 10. I admire King Charles greatly. I think it was very wrong for him not to meet his son, Prince Harry, this week. This from Lisa. Mark, King Charles has cancer. He can't risk his own health by meeting his toxic son. He may have been given that advice by medics. Margaret says, I think Mark is doing this deliberately. He's winding us up. Listen, Margaret, I've got a foot in both camps. I'm furious about what Harry has done. Look at all of my take at 10s for the last 2 or 3 years. But I think you've got to draw a line. I think the punishment beatings have got to stop. Lastly on this, John in Falmouth, who's a GB News member, says, hi, Mark, working or not doesn't change Prince Harry's value as a target for terrorists. So he should have the best protection we can provide. After all, he is a prince of the realm. Brilliant stuff. Look, thank you, folks. More of your opinions to come. A developing story, folks. The papers are on their way. But tomorrow's Mail on Sunday, take a look at this scoop, folks. Turncoat MP asked Minister to pull strings for husband's sex abuse trial. A Labour MP who defected from the Tories has been accused of trying to exert improper influence over her ex-husband's sexual assault trial by personally lobbying the Justice Secretary. Listen, folks, we're going to cover this in depth at 10:30. This, of course, is Natalie Elphicke. The leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, posed for a gleeful photo with Natalie Elphicke because, of course, Keir Starmer loves a photo op. But some have questioned his judgment about having such a right-wing Conservative in the Labour Party. Well, this is going to make matters worse because now allegations that she tried to influence the outcome of a sex abuse trial involving her now ex-husband. What a story. We'll cover that at 10:30. But first, more reaction to my take at 10 in the company of the Queen of American showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Kinsey, I think it is time for the country and the King to forgive Prince Harry.
What have you done with my Marky Mark? Who is this person? I do think that the King
I'm a deep fake. It's a deep fake.
AI.
This is a mask. You can see the line just there.
All right, exactly. Well, I do think that the King should engage in peace talks once Prince Harry does some maturing. He is, completely self-serving, a perpetual victim, which we saw in that statement that you referenced while he was in the UK. He has no respect for his elders, no respect for the institution, and a questionable relationship with the truth. He has remained defiant and detrimental throughout the illness and death of Prince Philip, the death of Queen Elizabeth, and the devastating cancer revelations from both King Charles and Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Harry's untrustworthy, and his delusions of grandeur are reckless, and he remains a liability to the future of the monarchy. So he still has some growing up to do, Mark, but I understand what you're saying. It's devastating to watch it all unfold.
Was it wrong of the king not to grant him an audience, even 5 minutes, for a hug? After all, our monarch is battling cancer.
I mean, I think what we're giving Prince Harry a lot of credit by taking his word for why they didn't have a meeting. The king hasn't commented on why they didn't meet. We are all reacting to a press release sent out by Prince Harry's team, and who says he wanted to calm speculation. Well, where was that desire to calm speculation when Omid Scobie accused your father of racism at the end of last year? So I just think that that whole release was entirely self-serving to, cater to the victimhood narrative that he's done such a good job of building in the States.
Let's talk now about Harry and Meghan's international trip. Are they still cashing in on the royal family and the royal name?
I think in general, yes. The objective of this trip is to appear like they are still on the level of the real working royals. You said a few minutes ago, they've become a joke in the States specifically, but also in the UK, and they need to improve their image for the Sussex brand as a whole. It was, despite being stripped of his military titles, Mark, by the late Queen Elizabeth, Prince Harry in Nigeria was seen inspecting the troops. This is odd. He's not a working member of the royal family. That's something he would have done 10 years ago. And to quote the Daily Beast, they say the king is never going to endorse a hostile rival royal operation. And I think that that is exactly what we see with Harry and Meghan. And the objective, again, is to monetize off of those connections.
Can we talk about the king's remarkable sister, Princess Anne, who I consider a chip off the old block in terms of her late great mother, Queen Elizabeth II. Is she the jewel in the royal crown?
I think you just need to come out and say you have a crush on her, because every time you talk about her, I see cartoon hearts fly out of your eyeballs. She's a babe.
I mean, she is, by the way, she is a very elegant woman and was absolutely stunning in her younger years, and is still a very, very fine lady. She's not wasteful, is she? She's sensible. She recycles outfits. She's no nonsense, exactly like her dear mum.
Yeah, the Princess Royal is an excellent role model. I mean, she stays above the fray. Her objectives are clear, and her heart is always in the right place. She's so beautifully British in the blunt way that she communicates. And she's, she is a wonderful example of a life of service. If I could spend the day with anyone, aside from Prince William and Catherine, it would be Princess Anne, because she is just, like you said, no nonsense. And I think her work ethic, you can't compete. It's unbelievable.
Well, indeed, a journalist at The Telegraph followed her for a few days and was exhausted by the end. This journalist, half Princess Anne's age.
Oh, yeah. I imagine it's like that, the second or third day of going to the gym for the first time in a long time feeling, where you're like, everything hurts and I am tired.
She's on trains, she's on planes, she's in automobiles, she's good-humoured. Do you think she deserves some kind of upgrade? Could she have a new title, such as, I don't know, Deputy Monarch or something?
She absolutely could, but I think what's so special about her is that she doesn't like the attention. She wants to stay below the radar and get the job done, and that is a very admirable quality, and it lets you know that her intentions are pure, that she's there to represent the blessing that she was born into, and she wants to elevate those causes that she's working for, and that's what she goes to sleep at night worried about. The next day, what can I do to make this thing better? She's not worried about if her picture was on the front page of a paper or what designer is going to dress her.
They don't make them like that anymore, do they? And Kinsey, they don't make them like you. Can't wait to catch up in a week's time. My thanks to the Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Check out her brilliant podcast, To Die For Daily, and her website of the same name. Folks, lots more to get through. I've got to tell you that producer Jack has been in with this front page. I'll go old school. There you go. I'll show you the printout because I'm a bit analogue anyway. Turncoat MP asked Minister to pull strings for husband's sex abuse trial. This is Keir Starmer's latest recruit, Natalie Elphicke, in hot water over allegations she tried to influence a sex abuse trial. Full reaction and tomorrow's papers with my pundits next.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Looking ahead to tonight, most of us it should be dry, and that gives us another opportunity to see the northern lights. So at the moment we have got high pressure clinging on, but that will move towards the continent as we go through the next few days, heralding a change to the weather. But before we get there, plenty of clear skies tonight away from the eastern seaboard. So yeah, an excellent opportunity to see the northern lights, especially across more northern parts of the country. And despite the clear skies, it's going to be a mild night for most of us. Temperatures in towns and cities firmly in double figures. So for most of us, a bright start on Sunday morning. Quite murky across some northern and eastern areas, but the low cloud will gradually burn its way back towards the North Sea. Showers breaking out fairly early on across parts of Northern Ireland, and then as the day goes on, parts of Scotland, Wales, England, down towards the very far southwest, seeing a few thunderstorms developing. Some of these will be torrential. Warnings are in force as we go through the course of Sunday. In the sunshine, though, temperatures reaching 27 degrees. But then on to Monday, another band of rain moves in from the southwest. It takes a fair time to get anywhere further north than Wales in the southwest. So for the rest of us, it's a day of sunny spells and scattered showers. That sets us up for a fairly changeable middle part of the week, with temperatures returning to something a little bit near normal for the time of year.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday nights on GB News. From 6, Neil Oliver. At 7, it's Free Speech Nation with Andrew Doyle. At 9, Mark Dolan. And at 11, get set for the week ahead with headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 10:30, so it's time for this. And we start with this explosive story in the Mail on Sunday. And it is as follows. Turncoat MP asks Minister to pull strings for husband's sex abuse trial. A Labour MP who defected from the Tories, Natalie Elphicke, has been accused of trying to exert improper influence over her ex-husband's sex assault trial by personally lobbying the Justice Secretary. Natalie Elphicke, who's switched to Sir Keir Starmer's party last week, triggered a fierce Labour backlash, faces claims that she complained to Sir Robert Buckland about the judge who is due to preside over Charlie Elphicke's 2020 trial for sexually assaulting 2 women. Now, These are just allegations at the moment that are being published in the Mail on Sunday. We are sharing these reported allegations. And the paper has been told that when Natalie Elphicke made objections about Lady Justice Whipple, Sir Robert furiously pointed out it would be wrong for him to interfere. So look, more on this shocking political development in just a moment with my pundits. But let's move on to the Sunday Mirror now. Star opens up on struggles. Helen Flanagan, my psychosis hell, former Coronation Street star, says she had a mental and physical breakdown after failing to properly process her split from her long-term partner, Scott Sinclair. Very sad story. I happen to have worked with her as well. I've worked with all the glamorous people, haven't I? And she's a very nice lady, and I hope she's able to put her life back together. Sunday Telegraph now, civil service diversity roles to be scrapped. A ban on hiring staff dedicated to inclusion in efforts to end the politicisation of the civil service by the back door. Labour's eyes in Skye to tax big gardens. The Welsh Government is using satellites to spy on homeowners with big gardens as it seeks to overhaul council tax. Welcome to socialism, folks. And dogs off the leash will be seized if they attack livestock, is the other story. Important development there, I think you'll agree. The Observer now, terrified families flee Rafah as Israel set to open all-out assault. And Tory defector was bitter at not getting ministerial job. Tory defector Natalie Elphicke stormed out of the party and joined Labour because she was bitter about being denied a ministerial job. Although, looking at that Mail on Sunday headline, that story might be the least of her concerns. Now, of course, Natalie Elphicke not here to defend herself and would likely deny those allegations. The Sunday Express now. Labour's £225 council tax bombshell. Labour's pledge to boost trade union rights would cost the average household an extra £225 a year in council tax. A new fair pay agreement, championed by Angela Rayner, was branded an act of economic self-harm that would fuel inflation and leave workers worse off. The party's deputy leader has made a cast-iron commitment to strengthen the hand of unions within the first 100 days of winning power. May God help us. And the Daily Star Sunday Throwbiz exclusive. Strictly Come Darting, game shot and the kicking leg. TV judge Craig Revel-Horwood is desperate to see a darts star on this year's Strictly. Teen hero Luke the Nuke Littler has got to be their top target. Game on. There you are, those are your front pages. Let's get reaction now from tonight's top pundits. For ringside action, we have anarchist and senior lecturer Dr. Lisa Mackenzie, broadcasting legend, journalist, author and presenter Mike Reid, and the brilliant, excellent policy guru and political broadcaster Mark Littlewood. OK, folks, lots of stories to sink our teeth into. Mark, what about this story here in the Sunday Express? Labour's £225 council tax bombshell. Britain has been in the grip of industrial action, strike chaos. Under Labour, it's only going to get worse.
I fear that's right. We've also, worth pointing out, although I'm a member of the Conservative Party myself, I'm embarrassed to say that after 14 years of Tory rule, we've got the highest tax burden since the Second World War, more or less. And I fear that if Labour do form the next government, they're going to dial that up even higher. And, of course, when you see these things that sound like a great idea, a fairer pay deal for people working for local councils, someone's got to pick up the tab. I don't know how these calculations have been worked out, but the tab will be picked up by council taxpayers, £200 a year, on top of the highest tax burden since the 1940s. Madness. Yeah, I mean, what do you think about this, Lisa? Because obviously what Labour are trying to do is boost workers' rights to make sure people get a fair deal at work. But the concern is it's inflationary, it'll add extra cost to business, possibly lead to unemployment as well. Will it do more harm than good? One of those well-intentioned policies that backfires.
No, I don't think so. And I'm looking at this article and there's no references here. I don't know where they've got this from. They've just sort of seemed to have made this £225. Let's not forget that council tax is very regressive. You can live in a £1 billion house and you're still only going to pay the same amount as somebody who's living in a £650,000 house. So it's a very regressive
I know, I wonder whether we should have something like, I don't know, Mark, a community charge.
Well, that was on a head count, straight head count.
Yeah, well, we don't want that. That was a poll. That was a poll tax.
That was a poll tax, a straight head count. Although
well, I mean,
everybody gets the same services.
No, but the thing is, why didn't the Tories bring in the poll tax? What could possibly go wrong?
Well, I mean, that was basically brought down Margaret Thatcher, didn't it, way back in the day? It's worth remembering, though, although council tax, you're right, a very, very expensive house will only paying the same amount as a pretty expensive house. We rake all of that in inheritance tax and stuff when people pass on and die. So the rich do contribute a vast amount of tax revenue in the United Kingdom. If you just look like income tax, the top 1% of earners now pay a quarter of all income tax receipts. We should be applauding them and thanking them, not vilifying them.
Well, I'm not going to be
People
thanking
smashed
them.
all the windows in Regent Street and Oxford Street. Do you think you're smashing other poll taxpayers' windows?
Yeah, you most certainly are.
At all.
Listen, Mike, let me get your reaction to this extraordinary developing story in the Mail on Sunday. And it relates to somebody that was, at least for a few minutes, Mike Reid, a feather in Keir Starmer's cap. Now, this is the defecting Conservative MP, who, of course, is Natalie Elphicke, who was a Conservative and a pretty right-wing Conservative, member of the ERG, supporter of the Rwanda plan. She's now a Labour MP, but it seems the honeymoon is over. The allegation reported in the Mail on Sunday is that Elphicke pulled strings, or tried to pull strings, in relation to her husband's sex abuse trial. Now, we can't get too deep into the weeds of the detail of this story. Natalie Elphicke's not here to defend herself, but it's not a good look, is it, for Keir Starmer either way?
No, it's not. But at the moment, people are trying to make it not a good look for either side in the run into the ghost election, whatever it is. But surely these days, whenever you do anything like this, go to somebody, try to pull strings, go in the back door, it's going to make the press, it's going to make the media. You know that. And it's not going to look good for you. You're not going to keep it a secret because nothing's kept a secret now. It's all out there.
Well, some will argue, Lisa, that this reflects Keir Starmer's poor lack of judgment to accept a very right-wing Conservative into the party in the first place.
I've thought about this because I can't quite understand what he's doing with it. Is he sort of saying to the Tory voters, look, I'm actually with you, and just hoping that the Labour vote won't collapse? Or is it just absolute poor judgment and a misstep? Because it doesn't seem... No one seems to be happy with this, do they? No, the Labour...
Correct.
You know, no one is
Neil
happy.
Kinnock has criticised the decision to accept her in the party.
But it is right to criticise, because a political party should, or once did, stand for something.
Yeah.
And it seems to me now that there are no political parties that stand for anything.
Well, I think, Mark Littlewood, this is classic Starmer, which is poor political judgment and opportunism rolled into one.
Was a bit like that, wasn't it? I think this is probably the weirdest political defection in our lifetimes. I mean, usually you would expect it sort of, you know, left-leaning, wet Tory MPs who might join Labour, or Blairite Labour MPs who might leave the Labour Party under Corbyn. This is absolutely bizarre. She's one of the most right-wing Conservatives in Parliament. And I'll tell you what, I mean, they thought they pulled off a coup by announcing it at PMQs, you know, trying to catch the Conservatives off guard, a bit of a stunt. Fair enough, you get those in politics. But I'll tell you what I think the long-term impact of this might be. Labour was hoping that there would be a stream of further Conservatives about to defect to them, and that they could roll them out. Maybe, I don't know who it might be, but another half dozen or so. I suspect the backlash over this might make those who are disgruntled Conservatives decide they still want to have a blue rosette, not switch to having a red one.
Didn't Oswald Mosley actually leave the Labour Party to the Conservatives?
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, Oswald Mosley was in the Labour Party at some point.
Yeah, I mean,
I think there is some history of madness.
Is it, Mark, is it somehow politically unethical to change parties in a sitting parliament? Is it that wrong? Should it be prohibited?
No, I don't think it should be prohibited. There are some people who think the moral thing to do if you switch parties is to call a by-election. I can imagine circumstances, however, supposing you defected because the party platform you ran on, the government hadn't carried that out. You could be true to your principles if something like that occurred. I mean, we saw a couple of Tory MPs defect to UKIP back in the day to try and force a referendum. The one that's weird about this is that she must have had a complete road to Damascus experience, I mean, of beyond Saul-like
well, I think
levels.
I think what she did, Mark, I think maybe she, like the Beatles in the 60s, perhaps she went to India and tried some mind-altering substances.
That's the best explanation I've heard so far, Mark.
Yeah, because I'm told she bought a sitar on eBay. Mike Reed.
I used to play sitar.
Well, listen, you're multi-talented. You're a polymath, let's be honest with you. You're a composer as well, by the way. You can do everything. But
Thank you for affirming that.
Can we look at what's behind this? Is this a hit job on the part of the Daily Mail or the Mail on Sunday in partnership with the Conservative Party?
Could well be. I mean, if you look at the Express just now, you know the teams that are lining up to actually pitch against either party. Yeah, it's difficult to know. When the election is, how far ahead do you hit them with these PR things? How much have people forgotten by the end of the year?
Yeah.
Really, is it they're throwing darts at the target right now, but is that going to drift?
Mike, you're also a historian. You've got a nose for a story. Is this what the Americans would call a nothing burger?
A nothing burger. I love it.
You know, because what we've got is hearsay. Yeah. He said, she said.
Yeah.
And the details of the allegations are that Elphick made objections about Lady Justice Whipple to Sir Robert Buckland. The allegation is he pointed out it would be wrong for him to interfere. Therefore, he did not interfere. Therefore, nothing to see here, Gov.
It's a very British politician story, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, Lady Whipple and
it's true.
Lord Buckingham.
It's like P.G. Woodhouse, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a very British political scandal.
But there is something to see here, Mark, right? Because you're right, Natalie Elphick isn't here to defend herself. I haven't seen what comments she's made. But there's no suggestion Robert Buckland did anything wrong here. He was approached. If his story's straight, he said, there's no way I can touch this. But Natalie Elphick would have done something very seriously wrong if this is true. She was trying to use her lobbying power to affect the judicial process.
But would it just be inappropriate rather than anything more serious than that?
I would think it's a parliamentary standards issue.
Do you know what I'm thinking?
Right.
I'm thinking about people in Nottinghamshire where I live, and would they care about this? No, they will not. They will care about the bus service. They will care about the health service. People will not care about.
Would that be a headline they just gloss over and take the next page?
Do the people that you know, who are the people that matter, it's my viewers and listeners, do they care about diversity? Because in the Sunday Telegraph, Lisa, civil service diversity roles to be scrapped. Is that a good or a bad piece of news?
I think where I live, which is in the Red Wall, I think people feel that there has been a great unfairness regarding them. And we are talking about working class people. So when we talk about diversity, they know that it's not them that they're talking about. So I think...
So they don't feel that diversity really means diversity?
It doesn't mean diversity.
It doesn't include them?
No, it doesn't. And we know that. I mean, you know, I live in the ex-mining communities, and people know that they have been completely overlooked. Their kids don't get any chances. You know, we don't even have bus routes. So how can we have social mobility when you can't even get anywhere?
And how would you characterise these excluded groups from the Diversity Project? Are they simply sort of poor, working-class white folk? Or what is the profile?
Mostly where I live in sort of the deindustrial parts of Nottinghamshire or the deindustrial parts of the country, they are white working class people.
Well, here's the issue, Mark. Diversity, in principle, is a very important and valuable thing. But diversity policies seem to be quite non-diverse, quite exclusionary. If you look at the take-up of university places from working-class whites, for example, that's the lowest cohort in the country, but there doesn't seem to be much focus on that.
Yeah, and this is the problem. If you allow this to develop, you get a kind of race to the bottom on victimhood, with various different cohorts trying to argue that they need a leg up. I read this headline and punched the air, Mark, until, however, I got to paragraph 4. These roles might be scrapped, but all of these people are going to be transferred into human resources teams. God spare us.
And they'll be doing the same thing by stealth, won't they?
Exactly. So this seems to me shuffling of deck chairs rather than anything
Mike,
else.
by the way, just to let you know, I don't want to be rude, but you are the diversity hire tonight, so thank you for ticking a range of boxes.
So I thought it was me.
No, Mike's got it for being dashing, handsome, and, of course, the finest broadcaster in the country. Radio and TV legend Mike Reid, the brilliant Mark Littlewood and Lisa McKenzie are back in just a moment, plus more newspaper front pages. And let me tell you, we've got a reaction to some of the other big stories of the day in the company of our last word guest, legendary Corrie actor Charlie Lawson, who, let me tell you, is giving it both barrels. Greg, can I mention the E word or not? OK, see you in 2.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
The International Monetary Fund has estimated that Russia will outgrow all advanced economies in 2024. This is in spite of all the sanctions the West has imposed on Russia, in spite of its removal of the SWIFT banking system, in spite of the fact that Germany has almost entirely weaned itself off Russian gas, and in spite of the 50,000 soldiers who have died and the endless resources it has poured into the Ukraine war. So, what are we missing here? Why is Russia going to grow more than the rest of us? Well, it's simple. Russia is willing to make use of its own energy resources to provide abundant supply to its citizens. Increased supply means lower prices, and cheap energy is inextricably linked to economic growth. But since 2008, the United States has grown at twice the rate of the United Kingdom. The big difference is that America has much lower energy prices, while the UK insists on masochistic green policies. But it's no surprise that the Green fanatics in the Scottish government, where they know how to be fanatics, have had to backtrack on their flagship greenhouse gas reduction target. The SNP has committed to reducing Scotland's CO2 emissions by 75% by 2030. Now, the Climate Change Committee has reviewed its policy and advised that the absurd reduction target is out of reach.
Can we accept the CCC's recent re-articulation that this Parliament's interim 2030 target is out of reach? We must now act to chart a course to 2045.
It is time to recognise the truth that net zero by 2050 is unrealistic and unaffordable. It's time we rid ourselves of this foolish and costly idea that will simply make people cold and poor. We need to prioritise cheap energy for Britain's consumers and for companies, for industry, enabling economic growth that will benefit us all.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Charlie Lawson waiting in the wings. A quick look at tomorrow's Sunday Times. And they lead with Natalie Elphicke asked Lord Chancellor for favour over husband's trial. The story will be tackling in greater detail on tomorrow's Mark Dolan tonight. But, folks, listen, the E word that I mentioned to Greg just a moment ago is Eurovision. That's right. We've stayed off the subject because it's happening tonight, and I'd much rather you tackled the big stories of the day with me rather than watching that rubbish. But let me bring you up to date. All the performers have now done their songs, and the voting has begun. It's not clear at the moment who will win. But how about this? Israel's Eurovision star Eden Golan, who was a very beautiful and talented young woman, received a mix of cheers and loud boos as she performed on stage after Gaza demonstrators tried to storm the show. Let's get reaction from a man who is a consummate performer himself and would never be shouted down, Coronation Street star Charlie Lawson. Charlie, what do you make of the mindless thugs booing the Israeli entry?
Well,
Look, it's basically bullying, you know what I mean? The irony doesn't escape me that the last musical festival that the people outside this hall are purporting to support, in other words, Hamas, never mind what they want to do to Israel, and never mind this young girl, what they might want to do to her. But the irony hasn't escaped me that the other musical festival that happened at. But and also, I spoke to one of my, I'm sure Mike is aware of this, and I'm sure everybody's aware of the fact that Eurovision has a massive gay following, and that's wonderful. That's great. I've spoke to a couple of my friends, gay friends from the next village, and they were saying if the people of Gaza could get hold of half the people in Eurovision, they'd be thrown off a frigging building. So there's a lot of sort of look. These demonstrations are going on, and you know, even in Southern Ireland, not a country that I would agree with an awful lot, but I know for a certain fact that you know they are not far right. You know what I mean? And so these demonstrators, but also as we well know, Mark, the demonstrations over here will be full of bloody Extinction Rebellions and stop the friggin' oil, because that's what they do. They just protest, you know what I mean? A shower of God knows what. I couldn't say what.
Well, listen, you could do, because we're past the watershed, so knock yourself out, Charlie. Listen, I understand you've had a look at Ollie Alexander's song. You've listened to it. Does it get a thumbs up from you? Is it a hit?
Well, yeah, it's a crock of shit. And but what about the bloody Irish? Talking about my friends from Southern Ireland. I mean, what in the name of God are they up to? You know what I mean? It's just they wouldn't last 5 minutes in Gaza. I have to tell them. But anyway, there you go. Sorry.
You've rendered me speechless. I mean, I'll apologise to anyone offended. That said, you won't need an apology if you heard the song. It wasn't great. Listen, Charlie, let's bring in my pundits very briefly if we can. Lisa, Mike and Mark. And Mike, listen, you're a music impresario, one of the country's best-known radio DJs. What do you make of the scenes over there in Malmo, you know, the Gaza protests, and a woman on stage being booed?
Well, it's become a circus. It started out as a songwriting contest, which I've always advocated being again. It should be about the songs. That's what it was about. We know there's always a bit of political voting. We know that always happens. But it should be about the songs. It should be about unity, about people getting together and forgetting their differences for that moment, for Eurovision. But it seems to have got more bizarre, more circus-like as it's gone on, and less about the songs, sadly. And we've got great British songwriters. We've got some great ones, but they probably don't want to touch it for fear of getting bashed or whatever reason. But it's a shame, because we've got some great songwriters, and our songs are rather weak of late.
Briefly, Lisa, do you still listen to and look at Eurovision? Do you care about it?
No, I don't think I've watched it since ABBA was on, actually.
Oh, my goodness.
When I was a child, I used to enjoy it. I think people have got a right to protest, and they are allowed to protest. I don't think you can hold one girl responsible for her government.
Yes, Mark, very briefly, a couple of seconds. Is it wrong for Israel to participate in this competition this year?
No, of course not. Of course it. I mean, I haven't listened to any of the songs, but I might vote for Israel on the way home. This has always been political, hasn't it, Mark? It's always been. Was it a couple of years ago Ukraine won? I think otherwise the United Kingdom might have won.
2 years ago.
You know, I mean, fine, but people were just using this to send a message of support. So I wish it was, as Mike suggested, actually about songs, but unfortunately it's been about politics.
Charlie Lawson, we have really missed having you on the show. Sorry it's so tight tonight, but we'll get you back very shortly. Say hi to your gay village mates, and we'll catch up soon. And I'm apologising to everybody offended by Charlie Lawson saying that the UK offering was a crock of... well, the bad stuff. Tomorrow night on Mark Dolan Tonight, Edwina Curry, live in the studio. Tory MP Lisa Cameron and Mark Meets. See you in 2.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Looking ahead to tonight, most of us it should be dry And that gives us another opportunity to see the northern lights. So at the moment we have got high pressure clinging on, but that will move towards the continent as we go through the next few days, heralding a change to the weather. But before we get there, plenty of clear skies tonight away from the eastern seaboard. So yeah, an excellent opportunity to see the northern lights, especially across more northern parts of the country. And despite the clear skies, it's going to be a mild night for most of us. Temperatures in towns and cities firmly in double figures. So for most of us, a bright start on Sunday morning. Quite murky across some northern and eastern areas, but the low cloud will gradually burn its way back towards the North Sea. Showers breaking out fairly early on across parts of Northern Ireland, and then as the day goes on, parts of Scotland, Wales, England, down towards the very far southwest, seeing a few thunderstorms developing. Some of these will be torrential. Warnings are in force as we go through the course of Sunday. In the sunshine, though, temperatures reaching 27 degrees. But then on to Monday, another band of rain moves in from the southwest. It takes a fair time to get anywhere further north than Wales and the southwest. So for the rest of us, it's a day of sunny spells and scattered showers. That sets us up for a fairly changeable middle part of the week, with temperatures returning to something a little bit near normal for the time of year.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What will